viewers, welcome to CEC Gurukul Lectures. I am Dr. Sanawar Soham from Department of Botany, Kalindi College, University of Delhi, and I will be discussing significance of plant systematics in Plant Systematics series. In the previous lecture, I had discussed about taxonomic evidences from various fields of biology, and today I will be continuing with taxonomic evidences from molecular data. We by now already know that the nucleic acids and proteins constitute cementioids. However, only nucleic acids, that is DNA and RNA, contribute towards significant analysis of phylogenetic relationships among plants. Traditionally, the taxonomists use tools of taxonomy to construct phylogeny of plants or plant groups. However, it has now been realized that the molecular data based on variations in DNA and RNA of different plants provide more reliable inputs. Such an assumption is based on the hypothesis that the phylogenetically closer species should possess similar genetic material and the distant species should exhibit variations in their genetic constitution. In recent times, DNA fingerprinting has become a very useful source of information in taxonomy. It allows comparison of different species of a genus, enabling understanding of the phylogenetic relationships. So, our understanding of cell biology reveals that such molecular data lies within cell organelles such as nucleus, mitochondria, as well as chloroplast of a plant cell, and all of them possess DNA and are referred to as nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and chloroplast DNA respectively. A number of DNA of a cell generally consists of 1 million to many billions kilobase pairs and is biparental in origin. That is, we know that it is a combination of male and female genome. Though stable, it evolves rapidly and it is more difficult to analyze. However, it is a source of data that could throw light on final evolutionary processes. Both mitochondrial and chloroplast DNA are uniparental in origin, unlike I discussed about the nuclear DNA. So, based on the observations that mitochondrial DNA, which is generally made up of 200 to 2500 kilobase pairs, undergo a lot of rearrangement as well as occurrence of many forms of it within a mitochondrion. It is regarded relatively as of little significance if we talk of phylogenetic systematics. But the most suitable genetic material as taxonomic evidence of green plants is chloroplast DNA. In higher plants, the size of chloroplast DNA in a chloroplast is only 120 to 140 kilobase pairs. Thus, it is smallest among all the three sources of genetic material within a cell. The advantages of chloroplast DNA in taxonomic studies thus could be summarized as it has relatively smaller size, it has large number of chloroplast per cell, relatively stable not only in organism but also in a species. It is easy to isolate and analyze and not much altered by the evolutionary processes that occur during the various processes that happen in a plant growth. All chloroplast DNA molecules carry basically same set of genes. However, the arrangement varies in different species. So, molecular data is being used to construct phylogenetic trees of green plants at almost all ranks. It principally helps in establishing affinities and relationships within and outside the ranks. For example, Monophyly of families Apiaceae, Caprifoliaceae, Plantagenaceae, Scrophulariaceae, Apocynaceae and Saxifragaceae, etc. is well supported by the molecular data analysis. It supports the union of families. So, few examples of it are Apocynaceae and Asclepiadaceae, the union of Braileaceae and Apiaceae, and Brassicaceae and Caparaceae are all because of the molecular data. However, the importance of evidences from other, rather classical taxonomy, should not be brushed aside. All sources of evidences should be incorporated and analyzed to arrive at a phylogenetic understanding of living organisms. Plants taxonomy is dependent on many sciences, as I had already discussed and previously told about, and in turn they are equally dependent on it. The activities of a plant taxonomist are basically to all other fields of plant sciences because the taxonomist provides an inventory of flora, ways for identification, names and a system of classification of plants. The accumulated knowledge of Earth's flora is far from perfect and will become more perfect only by exploration of new areas, collection of its components, their study and classification. Once names and classification systems have been provided, there must be methods for us to identify a taxon as being similar to another known entity. So now let's discuss some other aspects of taxonomy and move on to the next part of our lecture, which deals with field inventory, herbaria, botanical gardens and taxonomic documentation. Now starting with field inventory, so botanical or floristic inventories have a wide variety of uses and about as many methods of data collection and management. The choice of method depends on the goal of the inventory. Now, a simple inventory list may be preferred, and the person conducting the inventory will need familiarity with nearly all the regional species that could appear across a number of ecosystems and plant communities. An inventory list typically includes the scientific names, common names, coefficient of conservatism, which is also known as C-value, endangered or threatened status, and actual or typical ecosystem occurrence. Ideally, inventories should include at least 3 visits during different seasons. Now let's move on the most interesting part, which is herbarium. So the herbarium is a place where dried and mounted specimens are stored according to any recognized system of classification and are available for any reference. The concept of herbaria began early in 16th century in Italy when the collections of dried plants were sewn on a paper. Luca Ghini invented the herbarium and the art was disseminated throughout Europe by his students. The specimens mounted on sheets of paper were often bound into volumes, and this made it possible to move the herbarium specimens to different places of study. It also enabled the use of these specimens as reference material by physicians who prepared medicines from plants. Linnaeus popularized the current practice of mounting specimens on single sheets of paper and storing them in stacks. Herbaria are the permanent repositories of plant specimens and are sources of information about plants and vegetation. In this picture, you can see a herbarium where different herbarium sheets are stacked and they are arranged according to one classification system. Now, if we talk of herbarium, we can definitely say that it is a theater of database. Why? Because it represents the collection which is dried, pressed and preserved and also has plants from specific areas. It holds the original material that all species are based on and identified by the type specimen. It is a depository of material for genetic and comparative analysis, including studies that utilize DNA. It represents microhabitat, priority centers for biodiversity, and genetic resources. It also preserves a historical record of change in vegetation over time. Use of such data is useful in tracking climatic change. Now, we shall move on to the need of herbaria. That is, why do we need herbaria? We need herbaria for documentation of information, as it tells about diversity and distribution, that is abundance, hotspot areas, endemism and rarity. For understanding of components of biodiversity such as polymorphism, inbreeding, community, etc., the herbaria is needed. Also, it provides data for biosystematics and molecular analysis. Information gathered helps in studying population biology such as sex ratio, dispersal mechanisms, migration studies and viability. Now, another reason why we need herbaria is, as I already told you, that it is a repository of authenticated specimens. Now, if we talk of research and development, preparation and comparison of flora require herbaria. In case we have to do revision of a flora, we need herbaria. Now, in the field of education, if we are studying various taxonomic features or morphological characters, so we can make use of illustrations from the herbaria. For making up field notes, herbaria is needed. And ethnobotanical, it also has ethnobotanical importance. A list of plant species with their medicinal as well as other ethnobotanical values may be prepared after herbarium consultation. Support to intellectual property rights and trade-related issues can also be resolved with the help of herbaria. So, we shall know who uses a herbarium. The herbarium is used by systematists or taxonomists. Why? For the studies of evolution, classification and nomenclature of plants. It is also used by them to identify the variation within a species, to provide data for revisions and monographs, and to document biodiversity of an area. Botanists also require herbarium for study of biodiversity and invaluable biological resources for taxonomic and biogeographical studies. For studies in ecology, ethnobotany, pharmacology, anatomy, physiology, genetics, we need herbaria. Also, it is required to establish the existence of a new species or to find out that if there is presence of any invasive weed. Botanists also use it for a record of a unique plant for the use among an indigenous culture. And it also provides material for DNA analysis, tissue for microscopic and chemical studies, or information on species distribution and change within a landscape. Then it is also used by forensic scientists and law enforcement agencies, as it provides samples for identification of plants that may be significant in criminal investigations. It is also used by poison control boards to identify poisonous plants accidentally consumed by humans, pets or livestock. Horticulturists and gardeners use herbaria for studying, for introducing new plants in an area. And not just this, historians also sometimes use herbaria, as it provides information about expeditions and explorers and botanists and their works and travels. The conservation groups also require herbarium. Any herbarium is a bank of rare and endangered species. Collection data of a specimen can serve as a means of relocating rare, threatened endangered or extirpated species. Herbaria allow documentation of what plant grew in a certain geographical area over time and allow an estimation of impact human settlement has or had on species distribution. So, moving on to the various uses of herbaria, it is an effective tool for teaching and research. As I already discussed, if we are teaching botany, taxonomy, field botanist, plant community study, keystone species study, ethnobotany, herbarium is an effective tool. In discovery or confirmation of identity of a plant, or if we need to determine that it is a new species to science, we require herbaria. It is used for making morphological measurements and provides locality data for planning field trips. Data for revisions and monographs are also provided by herbarium, and it is also used for GIS, that is Geographic Information System mapping studies of past and future collecting expeditions. It provides information on rare, extirpated or extinct species that can no longer be found in nature. It also acts as a reference sample for identification of plants eaten by animals. Pollen for taxonomic, systematic and pollination studies as well as allergy studies also make use of herbarium. So, we can summarize the importance of herbaria as the plant specimens are permanently preserved in herbaria, and hence they are the major sources of information about plant diversity and vegetation. A representation of all species of a genus or all the genera of a family may be gathered from the herbarium. Preserved plant specimens of herbaria are used in almost all types of taxonomic research program of fundamental as well as applied nature. The classification of the world's flora is based mainly on the herbarium specimens. A list of endangered species of any region may be prepared after the herbarium consultation. A list of plant species with other medicinal as well as other ethnobotanical values may be prepared after herbarium consultation. A herbarium preserves national plant wealth, including the type material. Limited individual collections are identified only with the help of herbaria, and the monographs of genera or families are prepared only after the study of herbarium specimens. Thus, a herbarium can give knowledge about distribution and occurrence of plant species. Big herbaria organize training courses for young generation and thus provides job opportunities to the young workers. Herbarium material is used in studying the palynology, anatomy and chemical aspects of the desired plants. Herbaria provides loan of specimens for study at other institutions, and it provides scientific information to the public regarding the plants. So now I will move on to few examples of the herbaria of world. First, before we move further and check out some of the examples, we shall understand there are total 3,324 herbaria in the world in 178 countries, containing 392 million specimens. Now, if we talk of the most important herbaria, it lies in Royal Botanic Garden, Kew, which is in UK. And in this picture you can see the glass house as well as the pagoda temple of Royal Botanic Garden. The Royal Botanic Garden has approximately 7 million specimens. Largest number of specimens are preserved in Royal Botanic Gardens. Now, this slide shows the herbarium of British Museum of Natural History, which is also situated in UK, and it also has a huge collection of 6 million species in its herbarium. This slide shows herbarium of Paris in France, and it has 6.8 million species. This is Missouri Botanical Garden, which is in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. It also has a large collection of herbarium specimens, which is approximately 6.6 million. And this slide shows that glass house which is present in the botanical garden. Now moving on to India. If we talk of India, India has 45 recognized herbaria and 3.5 million specimens of plants are preserved in various herbaria. Some of the important herbaria of India are Central National Herbarium, the Herbarium of Indian Botanical Garden, earlier called Calcutta Herbarium, which is situated in Howrah, has 2.5 million sheets. Herbarium of Forest Research Institution, which is an institution in Dehradun, has again 0.3 million sheets. It also has a huge collection of herbarium specimens. Southern Circle Herbarium of BSI, which was earlier known as Madras Herbarium, Coimbatore, has approximately 0.2 million sheets, and Western Circle Herbarium of BSI, which is in Pune, also has large collection of herbarium specimens. This slide shows the National Botanical Research Institution of Lucknow, and it also has a herbarium. You can see the cactus garden, you can see the fernery in the slide, and it also has many more gardens and lot number of specimens which are preserved. Eastern Circle Herbarium of BSI, which is in Shillong, which was earlier called Assam Herbarium, and Herbarium of IARI, Indian Agricultural Research Institute, also houses a number of specimens. So, we can conclude that herbaria is a gold mine as it provides the comparative material that is essential for the studies in taxonomy, systematics, ecology, morphology, ethnobotany, paleobotany, etc., as well as being used for teaching and by the public. They are veritable gold mine of information and the foundation of comparative biology. Incorporation of integrated vital data like ecology, phytogeography, GIS databases may be found very useful in carrying out conservation studies. The curators of herbaria have to maintain a fine balance between providing material for research and preserving irreplaceable specimens. Now, this requirement is likely to prove most serious limiting factor for future surveys of this nature, but we can say that we definitely should make use of herbarium and can make use of specimens for studying plant systematics. Now, moving on to the next part, which is known as virtual herbarium. Today, information on botanical collections is made more accessible through digitization, database development, and the internet. We all very well know that these days we have started making use of lots and lots of internet-based databases and digitization. So, virtual herbarium is another step towards it. Digital images of herbarium specimens under high resolution along with color scale on one side of a specimen, electronic records of the data, and JPEG image of type is provided that will help the users to identify the plant species. Users can browse species by barcode number, family, genus, collector, and country. The website provides basic and advanced search capabilities. Text entered in the basic search is searched in all fields of the herbarium database, while advanced search allows the text to be searched in a specific field. A link of IPNI, which is International Plant Names Index, is provided, from which one can see publication details, the basionyms, and accepted names. A feedback form allows users to report corrections and provide any suggestions related to the plant. Today, information on botanical collection is made more accessible through digitization, database development, and the internet, and the digital images of herbarium specimens and electronic records of the data contained on specimen labels can never replace the physical herbarium. However, this is the only means by which large quantities of data concerning the native and naturalized plants of our country can be made readily available and will provide faster access to specimens for researchers throughout the world. It will also provide safeguard to the collection by providing a digital backup to the physical specimens and reduce handling and shipping. Now, we will take few examples of botanical gardens of world and India. But before that, we shall understand what a botanical garden is. It is essentially a collection of living plants maintained for both pure and functional studies. And according to Jackson, a botanic garden is an institution holding a documented collection of living plants for the purpose of scientific research, conservation, display, and education. It is a place for ex situ conservation as well as a place where economically and endangered plants are displayed for the purpose of research and education. The botanical garden is a living repository of plants arranged and maintained on scientific basis with accurate taxonomic identification of plants. So we can say a good botanical garden explains importance of afforestation, evolution or cultivation of plants, horticultural practices for a layman, distributes guide to go around the garden and look for plants of our liking. A botanical garden generally has special enclosures for growing different kinds of plants. Thus, we come across greenhouses, glass houses and other such special areas in the botanical gardens. The greenhouse is a place to grow plants in desired environment. In temperate countries, plenty of air and light is provided to the plants, but in tropical countries, we require it for shade-loving plants. So this slide shows a glass house and the plants are kept in controlled environment. So in the upcoming lecture, I will be giving few examples of botanical gardens of the world and India. Thank you.